Should we start now?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon and very warm welcome to all the participants. We are today having many participants from colleges, research organizations, NGOs, experts from various cities across India, as well as overseas participation from Australia, Nepal, Brazil, Bangladesh, Croatia, UK, and UAE. We thank you for taking out the time for today's discussion, which is on water sensitive design and planning, nature-based solution for in situ water augmentation. This is our fifth webinar among the series of webinars on water resource management for sustainable development and role of citizens. I am Siddharjan, Deputy Manager with Development Alternatives, and I will be moderating this discussion. And before we start, let me take you through some housekeeping rules. Please keep your mobile phones in silent mode. Please keep yourself muted and when not speaking. If you want to speak, please raise your hands. If you want to write something, you can use the chat box and you can write your name of your organization. You can also share your comments, thoughts, ideas during the presentation by the speaker. And while writing something in the chat box, please select the all panelists and attendees option, and you can write your questions in the Q&A box. Now I hand over to Dr. Vijay Lakshmi ji, Vice President Development Alternatives, for the welcome address and for the introduction of the webinar series. Let me share my screen.
Thank you, Siddharth, and a very warm welcome to our eminent speaker, Dr. Suresh Rohila, for taking out time for today's talk to our audience. And a very warm welcome to, on behalf of Development Alternatives, to all the participants. I guess we have about 80 people, more than 80 people registered. We just have right now 33 participants, and I can see some of the audience, very eminent experts already joined, like Dr. Chanakya is there. And I would urge that after the talk by the speaker, we would ask people to, all of you, to actively participate and enrich the discussions. So the purpose of these webinar series is to open our minds to the various dimensions of water. So water we are looking at in various dimensions, both technological, socio-economic issues. So we are bringing in the sectoral experts as well as practitioners who actually have dedicated their lives, and we learn from them. And largely we have invited college students and professors and researchers and practitioners and consultants, and I can see many of them have joined. And so this is the fifth in the series, and every fortnight we are doing these webinar series. And this one, today's is, as you can see, the logo and the poster is mentioning, it is about designing and planning systems for in situ water augmentation, and it has to be how it can be done in a natural way, nature-based solutions. So it's a nice talk by Dr. Suresh Rohila. And just before we getting into the main speech, we are going to, I just want to address a little bit about DA, who we are and why we are doing this and what is the objective, a little bit context setting. So DA, as many of you are aware, is born in around 1983, and more than 35 years passed. And we are about kind of a not-for-profit organization, and we have social objectives combined with business-like approaches. And we try to foster new relationships between technology, nature, and people. Go to the next slide. So as DA's mission and vision, you can see the main vision is to create a world where every citizen lives happily and healthily and in a secured way. And the mission is to create models which can generate sustainable livelihoods in large numbers. For us, sustainable livelihoods means the fairness, responsible behaviors, and also inclusion of all kinds of excluded generations, and also plan systemically. Holistical planning is something which these are the guiding principles, precautionary principles that we apply. Ultimately, what we want to achieve is to gain the 3 pillars of sustainability through clean technologies, natural resource management, and enterprise development, and economic generation in the local areas, and also ensuring the basic needs are fulfilled. And all of this through strong institutional processes. So you can see all the 3 pillars are addressed. We would like to come and do all of these in one place so that the sustainability of our initiatives become stronger. So all the 3 pillars of people, prosperity, and planet related issues. This is our main organizational vision and mission. Next slide, please. So for the topic that we are talking about, what is our expertise? We do a lot of water augmentation in semi-arid regions and hill regions. We don't have much expertise in coastal, but being present in last more than 25 years in Bundelkhand, largely our learnings come from semi-arid regions. And so we have been working in not only in NCR region, but with Rajasthan. Bundelkhand is the prime Karma Bhumi, where we are experimenting most of the models. So we also do resource planning and systems design support, climate resilience building, and gender sensitive approaches we introduce in the water security planning. And largely today's webinar is mainly meant for ensuring the citizen engagement, large number of people taking care of the resource. So citizen-led water quality monitoring and management, training and capacity building of people and many of the actors involved, and facilitation of community and household-based water management systems. Next slide, please. So you can see the pictures, which shows that all aspects of watershed management, for farmers, to urban rooftop water harvesting structures, to revival of traditional water harvesting structures, check dams, and revival of the ponds, lakes. These are the pictures that talk for themselves that we have been involved with. Next. And we also employ certain tools which largely can help us understand the quality aspects in a way that you can actually take decisions on the ground. It comes handy, field kits, and we managed to develop some of these kits, and we are still augmenting more number of sensor-based testing kits. Wherever they are available, we add them into our testing kits. There are essential parameters that you can see: fluoride, arsenic, nitrate, and bacterial contamination is one of the most important things. So it helps us understand the water quality. The next one, yeah. So while you have these tools, which will help us, the citizen, not only to understand the water quality, but also understand the performance of the filters that they are using, or the before and after. Also take decisions. And these pictures are showing we also train farmers locally and train them on how to do water efficient farming practices. And we help them participate in the micro planning process in the panchayat, and provide the data driven, both in terms of water, how much water is there, what is the quality, and those kind of parameters. We ensure that the local panchayats, they manage to get this data at their in the panchayat ghar, and may be able to start influencing the panchayat decision making processes. We employ the GIS in this picture. On the left side, you can see GIS based planning, which we demystify and sit with the community and help them plan for themselves. Go to the next. So this is all these pictures. So just one minute on this. So we work with local communities, largely with women, and we also train them on how to do resource planning, how to budget the water for themselves, and also ask them to start charging basic minimum. So that's how they are able to continue to manage their local infrastructure. Next. So with these initiatives, what we thought was for that kind of a transformative, and the worldwide now everybody is realizing any of the efforts that government or citizens or a large number of funding source agencies are doing, unless we engage the citizens, the water management is not going to be happening, and we need to understand all dimensions of the water. So the large amount of knowledge sharing is important. So these webinars are designed to build capacity, inculcate the positive behavior among citizens. How we can, the tools, techniques for that, and also training large number of youth and communities to adopt new tools as they are listening. So we have completed about 4 webinars. Today's is the 5th one. You can see the link here, and you can see all the eminent speakers in the past who participated. And we have a long list of speakers lined up, and we are catching them as and when they are available. And greatly, you can see the number of topics that we managed to cover so far, and interesting topics and good discussions so far happened. And if you want to see any of those, if you have missed in the past, the links are given in these slides. Thank you. Next one, please. So coming to the topic of today, which Sureshji is going to talk in an elaborate way, I just want to put the context. Why do we need to look at nature-based solutions? Why do we need to? We are doing excellent. We are just augmenting whatever wherever it is available, and whatever we can supply, we are able to supply. But that kind of a system is not working. We realized, and for in the latest policy, supply driven is changed to actually demand management rather than supply driven planning processes. But in doing so, still what is happening is 60% of the cities in India don't have water, the crisis is going to hit us. A NITI Aayog report 2018 showed us that. And by 2025, 21 cities are running out of groundwater and affecting 100 million people. And also there is economic loss, which is going to hit us by 2050. So you can see the NITI Aayog report on the right side, and doing the kind of ranking of the various states. Go to the next one, please. So in this scenario, don't we need to look at how nature has been providing water in millions of years? And is there something that we can learning from the nature for smarter planning? So how do we emulate the nature's water cycle management processes? And that is what I think we are going to learn hugely from Sureshji, especially both in urban and rural settings. How do we emulate those processes? And how do we integrate these nature-based cycle management or water cycle management processes into our planning systems? This is where I think we can learn. As you can see in the nature, it's the cycle that comes is whatever water you have comes back, precipitates back, it infiltrates, it's run off and again evaporates, and that cycle continues. Whereas we are breaking that by excessive consumption, and also we are not using we are contaminating on the way, and the whole water that is available is getting contaminated, and the water scarcity is happening. And to understand and change this cycle, we need to look at how do we augment this and introduce more and more of the nature-based principles. So if you do that, we also know that there are economic benefits, social benefits, and also climate change benefits. So we are seeing that more and more cities are having the flash floods, and because of we are not helping the natural flow of water, we are arresting through changes in land use practices, not allowing the water to be recycled back into the system. We are contaminating. All this has to change. This is where I think we have to learn from the nature for smarter planning. We want to learn on how to do this from Sureshji. Next, please. Yeah, now I'll hand over we are going to have Mr. Rohila speak, and I would like Siddharth to introduce our speaker, and then carry on the rest of the proceeding. Thank you. Siddharth, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. So now I would like to introduce you to our speaker of the day. So today we have Dr. Suresh Kumar Rohila. He is Senior Director at Center for Science and Environment in Delhi. He is also Academic Director of School of Water and Waste in Center for Science and Environment. He has been leading research, policy advocacy, and education and capacity development of key initiatives which are aiming at making cities water prudent and mainstreaming the water sensitive urban design and planning in India and Global South. He has 25 years of experience working with development sector, international, national, and non-governmental organizations. For example, Worldwide Fund for Nature, INTAC, and academic institutions like University of Bradford, and with the government of India and government of National Capital Region. He has also 10 years of closely working with Global South and establishing the partnership with both the government and non-government key water and sanitation actors in Africa, South Africa, and other countries. So now I would like to request Dr. Rohila ji to please take over from here, and I mean, people would like to listen your experience based, in
Thank
the
you, Siddharth.
water segment. Thank you.
Siddharth. Thank you. And Vijayji, thank you for the introduction about development alternative initiatives. Thank you, Siddharth, and very good afternoon, good morning, good evening for people who are connecting from different time zones. As Siddharth said, I represent Center for Science and Environment. My name is Suresh Rohila, and I would use a PowerPoint presentation for today's talk. If you can allow me to share screen. So I'm sharing screen now, is it okay?
Yes, sir.
So, fine. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Good. So, people might talk of today would focus on basically nature-based solutions, largely in human settlements, you can say. You can implement these things in urban as well as rural, but wherever you have a built environment which is being talked about. That is the essence of my talk. Just to give you a background, similar to Development Alternatives, Center for Science and Environment is was set up in 1980s, and we are a global think tank. We bridge the gap between the information and knowledge, and we are a recipient of the Stockholm World Water Prize for engaging with communities in water management. I am head of the Center for Excellence for water area for rural and urban areas both, and the water program which I direct, which is my for over a decade now, is basically a demand-driven research, capacity building, and awareness creation program. And for last 10 years, had an experience to engage across Global South as well as capacity building initiative, building a community of practice of 5,000 plus. So at the moment, I wear two hats. Another hat is Academic Director, School of Water and Waste, because we strongly feel that there is a gap between the existing academic institutions and the requirements in the field. So we have set up a School of Water and Waste, and we have leading global sector players in the area of water. You can see these partners with whom we have institutionalized partnerships. And this is a training center which is located. School of Water and Waste is one of the 6 schools at this training center which we have. It is a Global South Teaching, Learning, Innovation Center, finding appropriate solutions for key problems in India and Global South. So with this brief background, I will start my presentation. And the structure of my presentation is that why plan and design water-sensitive settlements, I would say. Don't just say cities, I would say settlements. And issues and challenges in urban India. And what learnings do we have from the past? Were we so insensitive that we are using the word water-sensitive now? And what has gone wrong? And why change the paradigm? Is this something which I'm trying to call water-sensitive design? It's a new paradigm. Is it a new, or is it something which is old one and we can have a hybrid and revive the old knowledge? And then what is the potential of this new paradigm or something which we are going to revive? And what is the concept and some case studies? So this would be my brief overview. But as I saw, I'm picking up few words from the announcement of the webinar, Sustainable Development. If we really see sustainable development, we connect with people, planet, and prosperity. And if I am given to speak on a topic, my topic would cover the area of planet, where climate resilience, water management, green space management, biodiversity, and air quality is emerging as one of the key areas. And there are some solutions from planning point of view, which are highlighted on the right-hand side, called GI, like green infrastructure, BI, blue infrastructure, and green and blue combination, and urban forestry. All these concepts put together under a soft engineering dimension. Basically, there are engineering dimensions like construction of dams, construction of canals, but there are some in situ water augmentation measures come under soft engineering dimension called water sensitive design and planning. So this would be the overview of my approach and concept. if we really see India, India has moved, slided into water stressed category in terms of the global indicators. Per capita water availability has come down from around 6,000 cubic meter per person to around 1,500 cubic meter per person, and which is an alarming situation. And we also see on the other side is that there is an increasing intensity of rainfall and decreasing number of days it rains. This is creating immense, changes in the water cycle, and the way the human settlements have to adjust. Increasingly, if you see in last 5 to 10 years, not only in India, across the world, cities, human settlements are reporting flooding, as well as reporting groundwater decline, as well as reporting water shortage. And India is a very rich, diverse hydrogeological setup. So with these kind of diverse hydrological setups, we need to, whether we need to have one single type of approach, or we need multiple decentralized approaches, and within the decentralized zones further decentralize into different scales. I think that would be my talk, and I would say that India is a very rich, diverse country from hydrogeological point of view, and the solutions also need to be from different context, site specific. uh, but just to bring you these facts which I've talked about, per capita water availability reduced, all the highest levels of decision making, making a call saying increasingly cities will run out of water, rural villages need water for all. There are big missions coming up to provide water, but also on the other side, even cities are being told that 21 cities will run out of water, groundwater. So this is the emerging scenario, and considerable human settlements depend upon groundwater, which is a source of water supply. Whatever you may say, we have constructed big dams, canals, but considerable population depends upon groundwater, and over extraction of groundwater takes place, and this source is underestimated and unaccounted, because the domain of water provision is dominated by civil and mechanical engineers, and there is dominance of hardware and big is beautiful projects. So the emerging scenario across countries is that we are over exploiting the aquifer beyond sustainable limits, and we basically don't know where the groundwater is going. Groundwater is actually fueling our development. Development maybe in agriculture sector, industrial sector, or even cities. So today, cities are growing like rapidly, both planned and unplanned, but nobody knows from where all this water comes for your construction activities and likewise. So today we have this kind of a common scenario in urban as well as rural, both places, I would say. And this is the outcome of that. Once you have supplied water, or if you have even fetched water with coping strategies, the water becomes sewage, and sewage flows into the river, drain, lakes, and land. So these are the common sites across the human settlements. Uh, Good quality water coming out. And another thing which is emerging is on the other side is the flooding problem. One side we have the shortage of water, groundwater declining, and this flooding which is common from different parts of the country. And increasingly also this also happens across rural areas. And people struggle to find solutions which work in rural and urban areas, as well as how to adapt to these changing uncertain climates which is emerging. So we have mapped these kind of issues, and we have found that there is an indiscriminate groundwater mining, high health impacts, growth of bottle industry, polluted rivers, and these all analysis have been done over 3 decades of journey of CSC's water program, trying to understand that why it happened. We see that India still, when I was in school, I was taught that India is agricultural economy and Krishi Pradhan Desh in Hindi we call it. Today also it's the same. Around 65 to 70% of the economy is rural. But then in the rapid urbanization, what is happening is we have large number of urban centers. We have 8,000 urban centers where people are rushing from rural areas. There is a competing demand of water between agriculture, industry, and domestic water requirements and city water requirements. So cities are growing at the cost of rural areas. So that's why I would say my presentation is not just related to urban, but urban is related to rural, because it pulls all the resources to grow from the rural catchments. So everything gets destabilized in terms of water and sanitation if this kind of rapid unplanned urbanization takes place. Few analysis based on the census 2000 data, but things have changed because 10 years situation has also changed. But yes, the patterns are same, that more settlements are shifting from rural to urban. Large cities of 20th century growth is slowing down, but smaller cities are growing faster. Like a smaller city of 1 lakh population will become 2 lakh, but metropolis city will not double in terms of population. the kind of difference which is happening. Small and medium cities grow double, but they don't have the governance, they don't have services, they don't have networks. So built up area is increasing heavily in both small and medium towns as well as big cities. And if you see in this on the right hand side, the light pink color shows the percentage of built up area increase. A huge population increase as well as huge built up area increase is happening. And the salient features are that the largest population and built up area both are outside the urban local boundaries. And most cases of built up area is greater than the population outside the boundary. So these are few facts which I wanted to show you. But these all facts are basically shown in this kind of few images I'll show you. That will also give me a chance to skip the few number of slides which I think Siddharth was cautioning me, sir, you have too many slides. So I would just say that these are the pictures which will show you the urban spread of the cities across the country. These red color expanding over years is basically the urban growth or the built growth which happens in the rural areas, and then we bring resources for sustaining urban development from outside. And what is interesting is the pre and post development. So when there is a natural area, open area, you have a pre-development, which is a sketch which clearly shows, and then there is a post-development that you have built up household or establishments. You result in concretization of the surface, and you change the runoff, and you disrupt the hydrological cycle. And the runoff has less time and space to percolate, and it flows down, rushes towards the lowest point in topography, which is river, lake, or sea. So this is the pre and post development scenario when a natural area is developed, and these things are reflected in a bad form. Analysis what we have done is what we see every day in every city nowadays and every built environment. That flooding is becoming very common. I'm just showing these pictures to show that everybody knows that this is happening, but these numbers are striking, and they're alarming. Less infiltration, huge number of concretization, flooding in urban environment and rural environment. But was it so in the past? No, I think not. We see these examples and good model projects which everybody says in rural areas. Similarly to development alternatives, they have worked in Bundelkhand region, and in Rajasthan some good work has happened. That you would revive a degraded land and degraded environment, and you will grow 3 crops there with water harvesting and all those stuff. This is leapfrog to prosperity in rural areas. And also this has been the practice, that very disciplined lifestyle in rural areas. Historically, 5,000 years ago, India used to harvest rainwater, diverse technologies, and participatory and decentralized approaches managed by people. Different agroclimatic region, starting from desert to highest rainfall area in the world, coastal area and hilly area. Everywhere we have different technologies. People were involved and they were managing water. And this was an integral part of web of life. Deep knowledge of water and elements, and there was a rich diversity and a social discipline. But as we urbanize, the most literate and the most educated society, we also lose social discipline, I think, somewhere. And in the past, also historically, there is enough evidence saying water was not a free good. But today we want water as a free good. This is also emerging. So analysis by CSC shows that there's a decline of traditional water harvesting systems. The community's role is reduced to zero. We are just reduced to become a subscriber. There is a bureaucracy and institutions which have been introduced. And there's the biggest, beautiful, and centralized approaches which are dominating. We have analyzed different sized towns across the country, big and small, to understand the water and sanitation both issues. And this book, which was released around 10 years ago, Mapping Water and Sanitation Issues, basically shows that when a village becomes town and town becomes a big city, we try to source water from outside because engineers dominate the world of water supply, design, and planning. We bring water from far away. For example, Delhi, 250 kilometers. Chennai, 100 kilometers. Mumbai, 100 kilometers. Hyderabad, 100 kilometers. Rajkot, 75 kilometers. Jaipur, 120 kilometers. This is Jodhpur, 200 kilometers. And this all is a result of a technical standard and a norm, that in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, there is a standard that whether you are located in Jaisalmer or you are located in Cherrapunji, which is the world's highest rainfall, you need to provide water to all, 150 liters per capita per day if you plan to provide a sewerage system. And if you don't plan to have a sewerage system, then a city can be provided 70 liters. That's the requirement for a human settlement. That's what is being told. That means from 70 to 150, the remaining water is only being bought from faraway places to flush toilets actually. And it is not even treatment. Sewerage system is only conveyance system, taking water from one place to another place. Treatment is a separate ball game, which itself is a costly process. So first, you bring water in the name of urbanization or quality of life, a huge amount of water. And we did a quick survey in that study that we have mapped all these different size towns. These different color bars show you the different size of towns. Blue color is the metro city, class 1 city is the dark pink color, and the light orange color is the class 2 and class 3 city. The technical norm of the water supply is 150 liters, is this dotted line. But if you see, every city which we surveyed was actually already surviving more, supplying more water than what was required. So there was some problem was management of water, and however, planners were busy making big plans for bringing more and more water from faraway places. So this is what is emerging. On the other side, we also see that bigger cities had bigger leakage losses or transfer losses, as high as 35%. But smaller cities where the supply was decentralized and there was dependence on groundwater did not have that much, distribution losses or leakage losses. So there was something to do with technology that we did not choose the right technology because centralized, like for example, Delhi, 55, 60-kilometer water has to travel. Then we don't have the resources to fix the leakages. The distribution losses are there. So there is a huge amount of leakage loss, and we thought that slums were taking away water. No, slums do not have the capacity to even store the water. Actually, they might lose some. They store the water in buckets, maybe, 1 bucket, 2 bucket, or 3 bucket. The water was being used in big, rich area, high income areas, and water was being used in showers, washing machines, and the places where flushing toilets. That is where the water was being lost. So this map of Delhi shows you these blue lines, which are basically in the map, the water supply network. And then the below map shows you the water decline map, the groundwater decline map. If you see that wherever there was no municipal water supply system, people were dependent on groundwater and they were extracting groundwater. And all the future urban development or built environment was being projected and is being projected in the new master plan also in these areas, which are the low-lying, low groundwater areas. First, you have good quality water, which is extracted, exploited, and you lose this water. So we see that all the outside areas where the network was not there, municipal water supply was very low, but in the core, it was very high. The core was supplied with the pipe network, but remaining all human settlements were depending on groundwater. So these maps clearly show there is an inequity in the water supply. There is a lot of problem with the paradigm that you bring more and more water, invest into supply system, more wastewater is generated, and more cost of treatment for production, save good quality water as well as sewage treatment, and that is all unsustainable. On the other hand, till date today, the national capital Delhi, as well as I would say across country, I can say is there is a 35 to 40% dependence on uh, on-site sanitation with the new toilet, like ODF being India being declared ODF, there is a huge dependence on on-site system, but nobody knows that where does this waste of these septic tanks go? It ends up in rivers, lakes, and plots. So that connection is missing. So we have these kind of scenarios. If you really see the 3D dimension of the city, these are the pockets which are unserved. There is no water, there is no sanitation. We are making pipe dreams and we are selling sewerage plants, but there is no treatment going to happen. There's not going to be sanitized work. These pockets remain outside the purview of planners. So there is some, what is missing is the toilet, sewerage, and the fecal sludge, which ultimately nobody knows where the waste goes, and there is an end result is pollution. So if you look at the SDG, it says that access to water and sanitation. I'm coming back to the global agenda, and this topic says that sustainable. These challenges are that there is competing demand. Then we also need to say that there is increasing risk to businesses, governments, communities, and environment. Now, clean water and sanitation needs to address these all things. And if we really want to talk about sustainability, then we should not in terms of what it takes first to supply water, generate wastewater, unsustainability, and then talk about its treatment, energy required, and emission. Industrial scale water management reduces cost of water produced, no doubt, but it has a high environmental cost that needs to be measured and accounted for. But nobody is talking about that. So decentralized water and wastewater systems, why do they lack productivity? Or is it that because we don't even know that how to value that, what is low input as well as low output? Centralized modern wastewater system is expensive, but it is also highly subsidized. People are not talking about that. People are talking that it can be solution. So these are the issues when we look at the SDG goals, that can we provide sustainable and affordable solution for all. No, this is about a different model of growth where we are talking about SDG. We are talking about putting the last person first. We are talking about values. How do we value the knowledge of each person? Value the frugality and the rationality. How do we become more prudent? Our evaluation or solutions, what we provide for water and sanitation, should capture the these things of the communities and people when we develop the solutions, such that we are more adaptive to the shocks which we get from uncertain climate and other situations which are developing. So all this journey of CSC, from dying wisdom to pushing for making water everybody's business, we have been talking about solutions now. That what do we do? Community role is destroyed, hydrological cycle is disrupted, and there is a paradigm of flush and forget. We are bringing water from faraway places. Even now, with ODF being declared, even villages will have flush toilets. With now, Jal Jeevan Mission, everybody will have piped water supply. People will talk about flush and forget. So now what do we do? I think there is a need for a challenge of basically the policy and the practice. Both there has to be innovation. And also we need to move very fast. Challenge of the scale at which the change which we need to adapt. And the challenge of capacity. Do we have people? Do we have practitioners who can think about these more holistic and integrated solutions? CSC has been investing last decade or so that we need to move fast. And we had in the past talked about, at the individual household level, you can do rooftop water harvesting, building, and all those things. And we have promoted this, at the highest level, like President of India also going for rainwater harvesting in his residential building. And we have also promoted these tools where individuals are made responsible to store water, capture water. But then, we have also pushed that individual harvesters are recognized, and also there have been movement. But however, I think we have also reviewed our policy and program. We find that the changes need to happen at somewhere else. That there are macro level possibilities, macro and decentralized level, which are the missed opportunities. The CSC has been working at that, how at different scales we can harvest water, how we can treat wastewater and reuse water. All these things combined together, we form it called water sensitive design and planning. These are combination of decentralized water and wastewater management technologies. And we are trying to connect with the real users and implementers and experiment and scale up this. So what is this concept and how it has been implemented? The concept is basically, if you see the end of the cycle, and if you see the beginning, every city first provides for water, then they provide sanitation services, then they start thinking of drain city, which you see now when flooding is happening. Then we talk about waterway city, that we try to revive the rivers, saying that let's have inland waterway and all those things. This is how things happen. But many of our cities are basically at crossroads. We do not have 100% water supply network. We don't have sewer network. So we can leapfrog. We can, instead of going all these second stage, third stage, fourth stage, can we straight away go to the SDG goals, basically adaptive multifunctional infrastructure. We design our human settlement which are more sensitive. Why do we need to design human settlement for 150 liter per capita per day? Can't we think of 80 liter per capita per day, another 10 liter more than the 70 liter requirement? Can't we manage sanitation provision with lesser water? So I think these are the big questions, and this program, this CSC has developed that we can organize our built environment, rural or urban, in a way that you can reduce the hydrological impact you can lower the hydrological impact of urbanization by using current opportunity which already exist. So I will show you how. In terms of water, I will focus more. Sanitation, I will only touch upon clearly. We will say that, as you develop built environment, you should delay, store, and only talk about draining the last option. We should not pave, pipe, and pump. This actually, in this process of pave, pipe, and pump, we lose a natural resource which is readily available to us. And we have developed this approach of water sensitive design and planning, which talks about making institutions which are responsible for water management, where they have reduced the role of individuals, that they should be made responsible for protection, but with people. The citizens should be involved in lake restoration, pond restoration, wetlands monitoring, and other things. We should also talk about, water conservation measures, like we should have water efficient fixtures, similar to less electricity consuming fixtures. Like you should have a shower which consumes less water. You should have a flushing system which consumes less water, which should be promoted, such that we reduce the problem at the beginning itself, rather than talking about later on saying that we don't have resources to treat the sewage when the flushing water has mixed with the human excreta. And we also talk about that if you have demand of non-potable water within your neighborhood, why do you first take your sewage outside 50 kilometers away from the city and then you bring it back for reuse? You should think of local decentralized wastewater treatment for local non-potable water requirements. So we have combined these ideas, and we have said that earlier we used to focus on basically individual household level interventions, where we used to say do rainwater harvesting, rooftop water harvesting. No, that is not sufficient. That will only capture 5% of the total runoff or rainfall, but it is at the neighborhood level where there is a huge potential. There is at city level and regional level, huge amount opportunities exist. And we have done these calculations, which clearly show that if we really can explore all these combinations together, then you can have in situ water augmentation. And first you explore these opportunities, then only think of bringing water from faraway dams and distant transfer. First is that you should explore these possibilities. So CSC has reviewed the master plans of different sized cities across the country, and we have found that there is abundant open spaces, contrary to what is being said that where there is an open space in this built up area. We have found that huge amount of open spaces exist, and we have also cross-checked on the ground. And these are as high as 60-70% spaces, which is under semi-public, public use, commercial spaces, residential spaces. Those spaces with innovation in design and practice can be used for in situ water augmentation. And I will show you with examples how this can be done. So this all data is of the master plans, which we have analyzed on 70, 80 of different size towns. Two things has been done. For example, Delhi. Delhi is an example where we have said that if we really use the open spaces, like Delhi has 16,000 parks and huge area under open area, then I will tell you that 40 to 50% of the current demand supply gap can be met by harvesting the stormwater runoff. We have studied Dwarka subsidy, which has 30% area which is unauthorized, this part. And we have this planned area, part 1 and part 2. We have studied the institutional DDA housing, commercial group housing sector area, all these areas. We have mapped the built up area, which is the dark brown color. We have seen the open spaces, you will see the gray color, this 68%, 29%, 20%. These are all the open spaces available, huge amount of it. And we have gone to the sector level and we have tried to understand that where there are open and pervious spaces available. We have done calculation of the rainfall, the runoff, and the potential of runoff capturing. So these are all detailed studies on the ground which have been done. We have also identified opportunities where in these areas, detention pond can be done, bioretention area, gully trench, check dam, filter dam, and swales can be done to moderate the stormwater. And we have found that 5 to 15% of the area of open space of each catchment can retain 100% of the 1 hour peak discharge from the watershed for 25 years strong. So these kind of detailed studies have been done. We have done this study for Noida also, where the entire city, we have identified in each sector of Noida, which also has urban villages, high dense developments. We have identified that you can bring in reduction in water demand by 26% if we fully harvest the rainwater harvesting potential in Noida itself. However, they instead of plan to bring water from Ganga River, at the moment they are dependent on groundwater, but they plan to bring water from faraway transfer as the paradigm is like that. So, but we have done a detailed study and we have submitted this report to Noida Authority. We have also studied that these examples have been done by private sector also, like in Jodhpur, this architect has designed a residential plotted area where they are able to harvest in the premium economy, premium flats where are a crore rupee property or something apartment. There are these step well type of design to harvest rainwater in the design which has been developed. So they are harvesting 17.5 million liters of runoff and doing rainwater harvesting in Jodhpur. Similarly, we have also done some wastewater treatment projects, which CSC is using as high visibility, high impact projects across the country. These projects look like this, like they go along with in your neighborhood in the landscape, where you treat your sewage, reuse it for horticultural water requirements, These are a few examples. Like Delhi Jal Board headquarters itself is using wastewater for non-potable water requirements. So these are some examples which I wanted to show that this is happening, and this idea and approach we have pushed to the implementation level. We have done a detailed study for use of parks and open spaces in Odisha. Odisha state is the first state in the country to issue the advisory on water sensitive design and planning. They have done around 10,000 structures in 75 days. We have also issued the roadmap and for use of open spaces in Delhi. And yesterday's newspaper, I was reading that in Dwarka, which was the case study which I've used to show, is the first city, first park has been developed for harvesting stormwater. So, as I said, there are 16,000 parks, and this is the government data, it's not my data. Every park can store, recharge, augment in situ water resources at a low cost. And then only if there is a deficit of water, then you think of bringing water from outside. So these are some of the updates which I'm showing you. We have done this, these are the breakup of those 16,000 parks which I was talking about. If anybody is interested, like South Delhi has 6,800 parks. Total is 6,000 parks. And starting from a city level to, and the Delhi still has 165 villages, you can imagine. So we have done this study and we have said that 3,423 million liter water is the missed potential, which we can augment by capturing the stormwater runoff. We have done these detailed parks in South Delhi, Saket Park, Park along Ring Road, Neighborhood Park in Greater Kailash. We have done detailed studies. We have also recommended structures where what can be designed. And by using just 1 to 2% of the area of the park, you can capture this kind of runoff and augment your resources in the neighborhood. So you can see the quantum, the numbers, as well as the physical landscape improvement. What you will do. These spaces are all blue-green spaces. So the blue-green spaces become actually the blue-green infrastructure. And so you actually mimic the water cycle. That's what I say nature-based solution. So we are not talking about highly engineered solutions. We are talking about basically nature-based solutions. And I'm happy to announce that this idea has been picked up by government also. Day before yesterday, on 27th July, CSC with National Mission Clean Ganga has launched a program which is 35-40% of India's area, where 2,000 urban centers are being targeted for making them water-sensitive cities. And the key focus areas of this program is to provide to push for water efficiency and conservation, decentralized wastewater treatment for local reuse, urban groundwater management, urban lake management. And basically, if we do these, then we will not be pulling resources from rural area, peri-urban areas, or from faraway places to meet the demand for water here. So rural people will have their own local site-specific solution. We will only bring deficit water only. And all these projects which I'm talking about, as well as international best practices, have been documented by a web compendium, which CSC has launched for achieving success at a scale, which I was talking about. So this is a compendium of green infrastructure system. This gives you case studies across the world and India, and the latest what is happening in India as well as abroad. Whatever are the new developments, case studies are there. These case studies can be searched from water body point of view, parks and open spaces, residential, institutional, and the type of intervention, whether it is a policy intervention, plan intervention, project, or who owns these interventions. These kind of interventions have been done, and these are this keeps on updating every month, you can say. The numbers keep on updating. And for the wastewater side, we have Mount, which is basically a web compendium for wastewater, sorry, decentralized wastewater systems and sanitation system. So this will give you successfully implemented projects for on-site treatment, decentralized wastewater treatment, fecal sludge treatment, and in situ treatment. So this is to reach out to larger number of people in a shorter time and achieve the innovation in policy and practice for mainstreaming nature-based solutions at a scale and develop the community of practice. So this database can be searched from location-wise, cost-wise, technology-wise. So what we are doing is we are trying to make water everybody's business, and it should not be just left to engineers alone. We are making that if you are a user of water, you are also equally important. We are enhancing water literacy to create informed public opinion to be more water frugal, We are also building huge amount of capacity of the stakeholders. We are training real users, real implementers. We also engage and we put resources for awareness of media and judiciary, such that we can advocate good practices and legislation is followed by strict implementation. So I think that's the approach which we follow at CSE. And we are pushing for water sensitive design and planning across both rural and urban areas. And I think, Siddharth, I will end here. And I hope I have not taken too much time, but yes, 5-10 minutes is I know I have gone about time. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Uh, Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. In fact, I would, we really enjoyed thoroughly, and we would, I mean, you haven't exceeded the time. You still have time. If you want to say something more, you can.
Oh, I'm looking forward to discussion rather, if there is some
Yeah,
questions or something I can,
yeah. Thank you so much, sir. You have covered so many things regarding the water management in urban and peri-urban and rural areas, and reminded us the importance of the historical, India's history of managing our water resources and planning and designing our civilization. So now I would request all the participants to feel free to share your thoughts, ideas. You can shoot the questions. You can unmute yourself and you can open your videos also. Uh, yeah.
If it useful, if everyone raises their hand, so you can announce who can speak first, who wants to speak. That way you can continue.
I don't think I was that clear. We don't have.
I can see there's one question. Arunaditya Sahai. Can you unmute yourself and you can ask the question yourself? Hello.
I can respond if you want to that.
Okay. So the question is, should we not look at bringing down per capita consumption?
We should, in fact, I have talked about that. I'm saying that we should, instead of planning cities for 150 liters per capita per day, I'm saying that we should talk about 80 liters or 70 liters per capita per day. And we can manage within that. This is being done as in the EIA rules and regulations, but it is not part of the planning, preventive planning. Like if you plan some projects in an area where there is no municipal water supply, projects get cleared with 80 liters per capita per day as per the EIA regulations in India. But when you plan a city under a master plan, you plan with 150 liters per capita per day. So the change has to happen in the institution which is responsible for planning, not the private people who want to develop areas. My CSC's campus in Alwar, where there is no sewage network and no water supply network, we only have 80 liters per capita per day. So you can do good developments on reduced water, which is as low as 33% of the current supply side planning. I'm for it. And for your information, you can visit CSC website. I'm forgetting the name of the person. CSC has developed the first rating system for water efficient fixtures in the country, which Bureau of Indian Standards in India has not yet notified actually. So like you have a rating system for electrical appliances, you should have a rating system of your water fixtures also, your taps, your showers, your washing machines. So back in 2016, when I was head of the Center for Excellence for Ministry of Urban Affairs, we have developed the rating system like 1 drop, 2 drop, 5 drops. So 1 drop is basically the most efficient water fixtures. So it is reverse to the energy thing, and 5 drop is which uses more water. So we are the first ones to promote and push for that. But we have a Bureau of Energy Efficiency, but we don't have Bureau of Water and Energy Efficiency. We need to push for Bureau of Water and Energy Efficiency in India.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, Mr. Chanakya has asked, are there good city level examples where we have shown good quality of life with less than 70 LPCD?
I've not said less than 70. I've said that with 80 liters, yes, there are enough examples. And when I'm saying EIA, I'm saying that 33-35% less. So in EIA, we are clearing projects. I have been part of the central government ministry EIA committee. I think with 85 to 90 liters per capita per day, you can develop a good quality of life, meeting all the requirements with all the standard, you can say performance, which is required from any fixture. So this is a good practice, and you can see all the projects like 5-star hotels and all those things. These projects run on this. And many of you, if you go to the malls and airports, for example, the Saket malls do not have a pipe water supply. I don't know how many of you know that. They get the groundwater by the trucks, and they just survive on 70-80 liters per capita per day. They have those waterless urinals, and But then the point is, these things should become a standard practice. Even I think the Vasant Kunj malls in Delhi, they do not have a pipe water supply. They are surviving on the bare minimum, like 80-85, but they are the highest end facilities, isn't it? And we all go and we use and we enjoy these facilities. Airport is a lower end thing where we use 80 liter per capita per day, or further lower than, because 80 is for the households. The airport might use 30-35 liter per passenger, which is going there.
Siddharth, I want to ask a related question here. In the second webinar, we heard Mr. Niranjan Khatri talking about how in the hotel industry that he was working in, suddenly overnight he was in Andaman Nicobar Islands, I suppose. I think suddenly the water shortage came overnight, and they had to do a lot of changes, and they have done wonderfully well. Less than 2,000 liters per cap, something standards cannot be met in the hotel, but they still managed. So that is where we learned how to do demand side management. And but you also are saying if a mall doesn't get the enough water, then only they will go for this. How do we emulate? Even if we have enough water, like Pune has enough water in some places. How do we emulate that people will self-regulate themselves? Because on one end, you also are self-regulating in a way that the wastewater generation comes down, and then the system efficiency goes up. Are there examples, and what do we need to do? Is it some kind of a pricing?
Today also we think that water is a free good, actually.
Yes.
Nobody values water, frankly, because nobody asks them to pay for it, and nobody tells them how much does it cost to produce water. So, like I was having a discussion with somebody. I have worked for 25 years. I also don't know the actual true cost of production of water by Delhi Jal Board, which they supply to me, and which they say that they will give me 20,000 liter free. Okay, so why will I preserve or conserve water or care for water? And I don't even know that how much does it cost for Delhi Jal Board to treat my sewage. They can treat it free, or they can subsidize me, but if I want to get the subsidy or not, but I should know how much does it cost government to treat or produce this water. And that's why I said the centralized systems are highly subsidized, and they are liked by politicians, they're liked by contractors, they're liked by engineers. The point is that, I'm sorry I'm using the professional word engineer, but it's not to undermine them, but the point is the government planners, I would say. So this is the point is that you can do with less.
Yeah, Mr. Sahaj.
I just wanted to share an information that in Australia, the water is priced and there is a planning. Even the farmers, the industry, everyone projects requirement for the next year. And then based on the requirement, based on the availability, the pricing is done, and they pay upfront to the government. And with that money, finally, they implement the projects to assure that was water to the big industry agriculture, where also consumption is pretty high, other than the domestic consumption.
But Sahaji, you're correct. But the point is that we have to develop solutions within our local context, and the political economy of water is such that we may not be allowed to go full throttle in this, start charging from tomorrow. I'm trying to say that if people were even told that how much resources are required to produce water by government, they will at least make them think. Today in Ganga Basin, where I've started talking about making water sensitive cities, nobody is believing that Ganga Basin is in shortage of water, and how much would it cost for engineering departments to bring water. Everybody is thinking because electricity is subsidized, the farmers are just extracting the groundwater. So there is a political economy of that. So I always feel that in India, you may not be able to charge for water maybe, but you should charge for sewage, I would say. So you should put a sewage meter, and you should say you don't have right to pollute the environment. So in India, that would work, I think, because everybody would say कि पानी का पैसा कौन देगा? आप पानी का मत दीजिए, आप सूरज का दीजिए.
I think somewhere we need to start, because when I was CEO of a company, we met, our company was zero discharge water, but that was not enough. I didn't discharge in the municipal sewerage, but until and unless per capita production we did not reduce, it didn't mean anything. I just recirculated the water in gardens and all, and you get a big ha on zero discharge company.
Fully agree with you. Like we have done for in the electricity sector, it has worked. Like you had these earlier bulbs, yellow light bulbs. You took it to the electricity board and exchange with CFL bulbs or LED lights. Similarly, you can take your you can change your flushing toilets, high water using flushing toilets with a low water consuming toilets. Government should come up, because now first they did it with the toilet provision. Now they should talk about water saving fixtures provisions. And it should be in a big way, so that we don't talk about developing high cost infrastructure and then think of sewage treatment. Rather than we become water efficient, water prudent, and water frugal. I think that's what is the times need.
Absolutely. I mean, CAC or so many other agencies, they are doing good job and a lot of data is there, but there is no action on that. So how do we really bring advocacy, and how do we convince government? Because I mean, 10,000 crore or 20,000 crore or 50,000 crore can easily be provided by the government, provided they are convinced.
I won't agree with that, where you are saying there's no action. I remember when I started my career 25 years ago, I got interested into water sector, where people said Third World War will be on water. So Third World War never happened in 2001 on water. Okay. So there is a lot of action which also takes place, but also the point is that there is also bad practice which is there in the market, which also reduces our good efforts also. So at the moment, like suppose CSC gave a a tagline of catch water where it falls, catch the rain. It was in 1997. Today, the government of India has a full program on Jal Shakti mission on that, which is CSC's thing, and we don't want to say it is CSC, but it is the term which was coined by CSC, catch water where it falls. This whole campaign the government has accepted. The government has issued policy guidelines saying treated wastewater reuse. But there is an issue of behavioral change. So we have to work through the reforms agenda. That is what in India takes place. At the policy level, we have been able to influence. We have everything written in the policy frame. You can believe it. We also may write saying that start charging people for the water. But how do you start charging where you are not able to recover even the property tax from the house? You have a house, but you don't pay property tax. This is what is happening. 10% recovery is there. Even Delhi, you keep on, saying that you are being given rebate. Please come and pay 100 rupees, 200 rupees. How do you recover full cost? The political economy of water is too big for that.
Thank you, sir. Can we take the next question?
Somehow we have been able to make dent. But in water, yes, you are right that some actions here and there, a lot of things have been done. But electricity, at least we have gone on sustainability way, the climate change, the global warming, the pollution, the exhaust emission, all that coal burning had bigger impact, and we went into equipment. And as you rightly said, we started grading equipment, we started giving a star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. So somewhere, what it is my personal opinion, that either we are not able to convince that much to the government. Water is equally important, and SDG water forms a particular thing, just like clean energy. Water also is a subject, but here the attention focus is not that much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm intervening here. Thank you for very interesting discussion. Can we take the next question? May I request Ms. Preeti to, Ms. Reeti, if you want to ask something?
Yeah, so thank you. I think I'm quite interested in the discussion here, and just wanted to put up a question. In fact, rather, it's not a question. I wanted to know your perspective on the fact that there are now many social enterprises which are now coming up in the water sector, and they are doing quite a lot of good work. So, I'm a researcher, so I have been writing some cases on social enterprises which are doing good work. I wanted to know that how can the entire, water management ecosystem be made more social enterprise inclusive? So how can things be, practically like made more easier for them, because they're actually the ones who are, quite focused on the SDG goals. They're coming out as serious practitioners. So how can we, at that level, be more inclusive?
I fully agree that, frankly, when I said institutionalization of water has happened and departments are there, what has happened is we have government, we don't have governance in the country.
Yes.
We need to bring in governance, actually. In water and sanitation, we only have government. So even the toilet provision was government. Okay, it was not, and it was a campaign. Now you see what happens in the streets, and now you would see where the Swachh Bharat mission campaign will go. If the government does not continue, the point is that it has to be governance mechanism. Somewhere governance, the enabling framework has to come, where you and I are not just subscriber, or you are not, I are not just pushed into corner or penalized, but it has to be. I have also spent some time in different parts of the world where I would say that there was a part of a country where I used to live was Northern Ireland, and in England, Northern Ireland, there was no pricing of water, but the water loss was less. But in England, there was high cost of water being charged. In spite of that, England reports water shortage. So there are also issues around those things that, but the point is that you should start from education, educating people. From the beginning, we are not told that water is something, what is the price of water? We don't know actually.
True.
Why do we store gold and diamonds into lockers?
Yeah.
And why don't we preserve water? Because
True.
nobody values water and nobody tells us. I remember at one point of time before the current government came into power in Delhi, we had succeeded convincing the previous government put up the cost of water on the water bill, irrespective of whether they want to give free or 50% subsidy,
True.
as well as sewage cost. These are some things where people will think whether I want to take something from government as subsidizing. And also with regard to social enterprise, yes, governance is required for that. There were RWAs, there were Bhagidari systems, there were all those systems, and also opportunities for other things being talked about. But we go 4 steps forward, 2 steps backward, 4 steps, something like this happens. So with political system, this will be there. And as I said to Mr. Sahai's comment, we have to develop and find solution within our legal frameworks, within our kind of communities we have. We may not be able to replicate Australian, Japanese, or American model here. You may also have to see that whether in India we would like the carrot or the stick. In India, maybe some things go as a stick also, but penalty also. You have seen during the COVID time what happened.
Yes.
So the government role is required. Government role is required, but regulatory role or something for social enterprises to function, and some smooth. But some examples are there. Self-help groups, incubated companies, and all those things are being promoted. But not in the kind of frame we would have thought that freedom to work and engage and see as a partner. Social enterprise should be seen as a partner in provision of water supply and sanitation services.
Actually, yeah. And in fact, interestingly, just to add on to your point, when you said that we can begin in educating people about it. So very interestingly, when I was having the discussions with these social entrepreneurs, they came up with the fact that it was a mindset block, which was the first thing which they had to encounter while they were going out advocating that it's important to have clean drinkable water democratized and available to all. So I think that mindset problem and that awareness, and that being charged in India, he very interestingly shared that in India it's almost a sin to charge for water. So that was the first stage where he encountered a mindset problem. And then, so of course, since it's a social enterprise, they subsidize the water. But then yes, I think it begins from the fact that educating and awareness.
Today's world, I can tell you, I live in the national capital. Maximum number of people, if you ask them this question, do you know where does your wastewater go and where does it get treated? They won't have any answer.
Yes.
Or if you ask them where does your water come and or what is the source of water supply, they don't know. Source of water supply, they'll say DJB. That's not a source. That is an agency which provides water, whether you got surface water or groundwater.
Yes.
The point is that literacy, the water literacy has to increase. People should know more about what they get. They know that where to get an RO, to get the quality of the water which is coming bad because of mixing of groundwater and surface water. But there is no understanding about that why the TDS is high in the water which you are treating through RO. Point is source of water you need to know, and you need to know the source sustainability. Then you need to. People are now in India, we're talking about Jal Jeevan Mission, pipe water and pipe dream, but then we should also know the sources. I think largely groundwater. The quality needs to be ensured. The quality will be ensured only when you do in situ water augmentation through dilution of by rainwater harvesting, recharging aquifers, and all those things.
True.
So I think source, the definition of source itself becomes sometimes, somebody who supplies water to my house, that 50 liters of distillery. So Gupta ji becomes my source of water. Or, Agarwal ji, sorry, I'm using this surname.
Yeah, that's
The
true.
shopkeeper's name, Agarwal ji becomes my source of water supply.
Yes.
It's not source, it's an agency, it's a coping strategy.
True.
We have started relying on coping strategies in urban environments or built environments. Even in the remotest part of the country, in rural area, you're finding that distillery bottle everywhere.
True.
So source of drinking water is becoming that bottled water.
Yes.
Okay, source of water is people are losing connect with where the water comes from. It's like same thing like milk. Today the children think milk is coming from only mother dairy, but not from buffalo or cow. Which is the mother dairy pouch. They don't know where the milk comes from.
True. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Mr. Shreyans. Mr. Shreyans, you can unmute and open your video and ask the question. Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Read it out.
Yeah, he has unmuted himself. Yeah, you can carry on.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, sir, for this insightful session. Like, it definitely, it gave us great insights about the subject. Since I belong from a water domain, I am a postgraduate in water science and governance. So it was an insightful session for me. So thank you so much for that. My question was that, like, we know that, the prime reason for shifting towards groundwater resource more is because of surface water bodies pollution. Because what's happening is, since the water pollution is happening on surface water bodies, people are shifting or depending more on groundwater resource, and this in turn is overburdening the groundwater reservoir. So the thing which is happening is we are getting devoid, or we are over exploiting the groundwater resource. So we know that one way to share this burdening nature is by creating potential surface water body reservoirs, or lake revival projects, which we have already talked about. But it will take a long time. So for the time being, till all these steps happen, any specific things which we can adopt for or look at to share this, to deal with this, like to deal with this overburdening nature?
I think, Shreyans, the problem narrative itself is wrong to say that people are shifting because surface water is not available in sense. Our groundwater is available 24/7 within your control. And you are ready to pay that extra cost for groundwater. But in the surface water, it is controlled by an institution. And some people get it and some people don't get it.
True. Yeah.
Okay, groundwater, if you own a plot which is unauthorized colony also, you will have a hand pump, or you will have a little bit more money, you will go further deeper and you can have access to water. So that is what is groundwater. You have a reliable source, and for a living, water is life. You have water. Okay. It doesn't matter to you surface or not. But groundwater is largely, surface water is largely controlled by institutions now. Dams, canals, pumping, and then you will have a pipe and you will have a tap, and then you will have to depend upon them. Ki subah ghanti bajegi, 6 baje, like Delhi, I live in Delhi. So then the water supply will come, or an alternate day water will come. That's where is the institutionalization of water. If the water was coming from your canal or lake, you know that there is a water in canal or lake or not. But you are talking for bringing water from Renuka Dam, Narmada Dam, Keshau Dam, where you don't have any connection with that reservoir. Okay, you don't have any connect with water.
True. Thank you so much, sir, for clarifying.
Thank you, Shreyans. Next, we have Mr. Ravi Prakash. He has few questions.
Yes, Ravi. Looking
Ravi.
forward to बताइए क्या कुछ.
Yeah, Ravi, you can unmute and open your video.
Hello. Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, Ravi, please, louder.
Hi, Royla sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, बताइए.
Yeah. So, sir, I'm from DOHS Center for Climate Change, and I'm working on NBS. So, I wanted to know about few questions. That suppose currently, as from your CGN's platform, I can observe that the cases of NBS in India is little fragmented right now. So, is there any national level policy intervention that is going on right now, or is the government working on this to support NBS and India?
I think in a big way, I would say yes. In terms of policy, there is a lot happening. But in terms of practice, even if we decide tomorrow that all cities will do NBS, do we have the practitioners? Do we have the engineers? Do we have the
Exactly.
architects?
The skill.
So there's no skill. Like I'm seeing that river-centric say master plans are being talked about. हमें master plan ही बनाना नहीं आता, हम river-centric master plan कहाँ बनाएंगे? Point is that we are failing to deliver and execute the master plans which have been made because the master plans are largely city plans or planning for a built environment is a multi-sectoral and multi-domain exercise. So we leave it to only one group of people who decide about the future of city for 20 years or human settlement for like a regional plan where even rural area and urban area comes to only one set of people. And then we give only 45 minutes for them to say, I'm just telling you about MPD 2041, which is under review at the moment. We decide the future of water for a city in 45 minutes webinar and in 30 minutes in which you talk about that. In 15 minutes, you take feedback from a city of, so big city. And then you think that you will be able to solve the problem of water in Delhi. So you have to go to every ward and take feedback and, consult that what are the problems. And then you make one norm saying everybody in Delhi will get 150 liters per capita. It is only an eye wash what we do. We don't go to the field and connect with the field problems. I think that is what is the issue over here, I would say.
Yes.
Nature-based solutions need to connect with the local hydrology, drainage, topography, and then develop solutions.
Yes, exactly. Since
The
it's
city of Dwarka, which I have used as a case example, we are also now where we are pushing for changes, is a city which was planned historically as a zero runoff city. But it could not take off as a zero runoff because of the centralized municipal engineering norms. And we connected this city, which is located 55 kilometers away from the main water supply system to the main, to the river supply. And we neglected the groundwater and we neglected the sewage treatment locally, which could provide non-potable water requirement to Dwarka. So now Delhi, Dwarka depends upon water supply from 55 kilometers away with all the leakage losses which will happen. And also it depends upon an institution to provide you water. We don't even have any planning to harvest the rainwater. That also goes to the Najafgarh drain to the river, which is already flooded. So we have just broken all the natural cycle in there.
Exactly.
So it has to be site specific. Like there are project level things are happening, like, JNU campus is designed keeping in mind the topography hydrology. Okay.
Yeah.
Similarly, there are a few projects like you would see in EIA when project comes through EIA thing, you will show that. But in a normal city planning or planning, what you do is you level the area. And then you think that walking tracks and parks should be all same level. Why should it be same level?
If the topography is different, why should it be?
So then you first level the entire area. Then you say that no, because now you have lost the low-lying area where water could be stored for some time. Now 16,000 parks all have been leveled to same level, forgetting the topography, what it was there. You can have a big program in every city to just redesign the parks and capture at least 25% of the total runoff. That itself will augment your groundwater, and those retention ponds will give you non-potable water supply that you can easily reduce in coming 5 years, 20% of your demand of water which will be there. Innovation in policy and practice is required for nature-based solutions.
Sir, regarding this, there's one more question that I was thinking that for say, so cities like Mumbai where there's a high intensity rainfall, how do you see the potential of NBS in managing this flooding issue? So is there any case studies from these cities from where the rainfall intensity is higher?
Do wherever what you can do, and if ultimately if engineering is the only solution at some point, like for example, yesterday I was in a session where a professor from IIT Delhi was talking about that when they were analyzing Gurgaon's flooding problem, they found at one place that the drain which was coming was meeting at the other drain at a perpendicular. So that was the problem. So there might be some design flaws also, when the stormwater is coming. So you need to relook at, you will not find networks and design networks maps in Mumbai. The problem is that you need to go back to your drawing board. You need to see that who designed the structures 50 years ago, look at the designs of the stormwater drains, redesign and, with some enhanced capacity where there is no space available. But wherever there is space available, at least there you harvest the stormwater and reduce the burden on the final point, which is receiving the stormwater. because there is a river which will receive the water, which will be already flowing high because the water is coming from every part of the catchment. So do as much as possible wherever open areas are available. And if there is an engineering solution, I'm not a very, very purist nature-based solution. I am keen to, I would say that you can, as I was saying, that only deficit should come from outside. Only if you cannot store the rainwater, then that rainwater should be left to river or sea. I think that is the approach we should do. That why do we leave a resource and we think stormwater is a liability, not a resource? That whole definition has to change.
Yes.
Wastewater is a resource, not a wastewater.
Not a way.
It's a used water. This is what is needed in nature-based solutions actually.
Yeah.
So my
One last-
wastewater is others' resource.
Yeah, exactly. So one last question. So as you obviously know that there are green roofs involved in NBS, or you can say there are biosoil software. So there's a combination of private and public property in this. So how do you see a community can engage in managing the NBS in India? So even if we work for a property, for say a complex,
You should be allowed to manage your own parks. As simple as that. Why should DDA manage the parks? Because you are the user of the park, you should be involved. I have seen rainwater harvesting done in parks. They are not maintained because people are not aware there are rainwater harvesting structures in the parks. तो लोगों को पता ही नहीं है कि वहाँ rain garden है. They come and throw waste into that. They will throw junk into that because you have to work. Because parks function of the park is community. You have to engage with community. I have seen restoration projects of step wells being done as an engineering exercise. The point is that you have to engage with people who are the users. The function of that should be revived.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Savi. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And it's a very interesting discussion. And we would love to have you once again. I think one session is not enough. So you have covered so many aspects of water management and especially the nature-based solutions and how to manage our resources. So now moving on to our next short session of where we usually keep a quiz just for a fun. So can I request IT team to start the polling session? So yeah, now this polling session has been launched. I request all the attendees, all the participants to participate in this. It's just for a fun, just for entertainment, not to test anybody's awareness or knowledge. And yeah, please feel free to participate in this.
Questions are not from my presentation.
No.
Just to tickle everybody's mind.
Yeah, please feel free to participate in this quiz.
So you can have one question. How many slides did I have?
I know the answer. So far nobody is participating. What's happening, guys?
I think we can't select the options. So
Yeah,
we don't have them.
Oh, basically you
No,
are
the
not in
panelist cannot.
yeah.
Panelist cannot, but the attendees can.
Shubham, may I request, can you transfer the, Ravi and other attendees to the attendees section
Other
so that
panelists
they
to
can, yeah, so that they can participate in the quiz.
जी, good evening. कैसे हैं आप?
Very good. It was very fascinating.
There are more questions. Siddharth, how are you going to handle on the chat box? Dr. Indumati has asked few questions. Dr. Khanna just joined, I suppose.
Okay. So by the time polling is happening, we can take Dr.
6 minutes more to go, don't worry.
So I think Dr. Indumati has shared some comment.
Dr. Indumati, why don't you also speak up? Very interesting questions you posed.
Yeah. Dr. Indumati, you can unmute yourself.
I hope she
Read
will.
out.
Sorry.
You want to read out?
Yeah, read out.
Read out because time. Yeah,
Yeah, she's here.
She's there. She's there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. It was a very nice talk, Dr. Rohila. I've heard you in other occasions too. Some of my thoughts when it comes to sustainable water management, when it comes to technology in particular, I agree with you. We need to have, I would say, we need to have a blend of nature-based solutions and technology, particularly in urban infrastructure, urban water bodies. When we are trying to restore urban water bodies, this is basically from my experience, we don't really have space to put up infrastructure. So nature-based solution works fine, but then there is not even space for these nature-based solutions, like constructed wetlands. They need a large area. So again, there's a need for new innovations, hybrid solutions, depending on the site conditions. There needs to be a lot of on like project to project, we need to have innovative solutions. That is what my experience. And often people are even taken for a ride. Like bioremediation is one thing which I am hearing over and over again. I mean, people promote bioremediation to just have like magic bugs. You add them in the water and then it's all gone. And many people buy that and invest in these solutions, and then they don't understand that it's a recurring treatment. The cost is prohibitive. The recurring cost is prohibitive. The capital cost may be less. So that's why I have that comment there.
I'll agree. I agree with your comment on site-specific thing. Please continue.
Should be site specific, and there should be available technologies. There should be some kind of a rating, just like you have the fixtures rating you shared. Many people are at a loss on what to choose from. There's an array of technology being pushed by water treatment companies and consultants. Technical.
We don't have rating system in India yet notified.
Yeah.
Indian manufacturers are exporting, but in India, BIS is not yet. We are 20 years behind, 25 years behind.
Yeah.
What do we do in that case? What does it take? Rocket, we are going to launch rocket and we are going to space, but we are not putting, standards for fixtures. So there is a problem with the technologist also. Please understand that. So
yeah,
you are undermining the nature-based experience, but on the other side, in spite of high-tech solutions like desal in Chennai, we had to face problems. So, please understand that wherever what works also has to take into account. And certainly being trained as a town planner and then done my PhD on groundwater and urban planning, I can find you lower side. I'll give you 2,000 places where in Chennai or wherever, which city you are coming from. I can give you 2,000 places for innovation to augment water in city. I have confidence in my training, because if I go to the ground, I can give you that. Because when you want to do metro and underground train, you can find places to make yards, construction places, and all those things in the big city. But when you want to do water harvesting, you will not be given the space. Why? In every city, you are pushing metro and you are finding place for metro and doing everything. The parks, which are for children play area, are being used for metro and various other areas. But if you go looking for it, you will find it. And as I've said, I've analyzed the master plan. I can tell you that, and I told very clearly, I'm not a purist in that sense. Technologies does provide a solution. I do drive a car. I do fly an aeroplane. I do respect the technology, but there has to be a right mix of that. What I would say is, even in cities like Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi, I would find that I'm giving you a number of Delhi, which is the official data submitted to NGT. Till that time, people didn't even know the huge potential of 16,000 parks which are unutilized, and they are extracting groundwater but not recharging groundwater and depleting the aquifer.
Yeah, there needs to be a lot of capacity building, even for the
capacity building of whom? The parks are with institutions. They are responsibility of development authorities and municipal corporations.
No, I mean, like in Chennai, when there's whole I'm talking about small, like even like plumbers. When the whole rainwater harvesting wave happened way back in the early 2000s, Chennai was the first, right? That was one of the quiz questions, I think. So everybody, it was mandated, but then the plumbers were not, the skill level of the plumbers was not adequate. to conceive the whole idea why the government wants to do this and have proper infrastructure in place for rainwater. So basically it was all only on paper, 100% coverage of individual rainwater harvesting, but on ground it was a mess. I witnessed it personally.
So it was a government thing because people were forced to do, or if people who did not do, people's houses, it was constructed by force, and then they were being charged. Then there was no mechanism to operate, maintain of the system. So, and then we got, so people have to be involved in every stage from planning it itself. But it was just one bureaucratic exercise, one department trying to push one's agenda, saying I have a target and numbers, I have achieved something. Purpose is how much water did it result in, how much groundwater does it become. I am trying to say that every city should set a target saying by 2025 we will harvest 5% of rainwater. We will enhance water table by, so the numbers should be in terms of water augmentation, not in terms of the structures made and the tenders given and the money spent.
Yeah.
So the target should be by 2040 master plan in Delhi, we will harvest 25% of the storm water falling into the urban areas. That, like you have a population projection, you also make projection for stormwater runoff, such that you reduce. But what you have is only numbers saying we will do one lake in a city. One lake can be 1 hectare, one lake can be 100 hectares also. But in terms of how much you will do, what is the physical performance, nobody talks about. In water terms, we are all water experts. I want to know that how much recharge would it mean, how much surface water it will mean, and what will it bring value to me. Point is still, it is a piecemeal approach when Ministry of Urban Affairs does some project and says that we are being sensitive to water. No, they are being sensitive to numbers. That they have to project that numbers should be shown that something is being done, but the translation is that these numbers should concretize into physical performances. These 20,000 rainwater harvesting structures should result in what did it mean in terms of how much water recharge. I can tell you that whatever rainwater harvesting structures done in Chennai, if you really look at how much potential of rainwater harvested was there, it would not be more than 1% of the total runoff of Chennai which was being harvested in those structures. How can you expect those rooftop water harvesting structures to meet the demand of Chennai? It can't be. You have to do macro level rainwater harvesting by municipal engineers. Municipal engineers were supposed to do, town planners were supposed to do stormwater runoff management, but they passed on the inefficiency of their departments to the individual households. Ki aap kijiye rainwater harvesting. At the moment also it's the same thing that people who want rebate, they should do it, but why should government not do it? Because government has institutionalized saying that they are responsible for providing of water. And if they fail to provide water and sanitation, then they should look for innovation in policy and practice. Why should, if in Delhi people are made responsible, you have a plot, you should, for 400 square meter plot, this is a punishment saying that if you have a 400 square meter plot, you should do rainwater harvesting. No, your government should also do. Nobody questions government in that sense. Over here, the question that everybody should do wherever possible, we should do, and then we should talk about anything which is high cost. I think my approach would be that how many IITs, how many SPAs, how many human settlement departments across the country do rainwater harvesting? Tell me. What do we teach to people? I can challenge you that we run a program of green university and green schools. Not many schools do rainwater harvesting or teach rainwater harvesting. Not many universities teach rainwater harvesting. This is what is the innovation or the scale we can't bring nature-based solution, because we prepare people for Silicon Valley, we prepare people for making STPs and WTPs. In master plan, when I was studying, I was taught to make only provision for networks and services. I was not told that how to design a septic tank. And many engineers also still do not know how to design a good septic tank, because they are planning for only big centralized system. And today, the 65-70% of the country is on septic tanks and poor quality septic tanks, which is left to a plumber and a mason. And the mess of poor quality water, surface water quality and groundwater is because of the poor quality of septic tanks.
Right.
Please understand that the issue is over here something else, that we are preparing people for making Delhi, Chennai, as San Francisco, and New York, but not making our own cities livable with local hard realities. We don't have colonies like Britishers had, to clean river Thames. I have to clean Yamuna with my own resources. And who will pay? Nobody is ready to pay for that. Yamuna cleaning, or your Adyar river or whatever. Who pays for river cleaning? No. I don't have the luxury of having colonies to bring resources to clean my rivers. Nobody pays for it.
I have one, it's not question, it's a comment. So is CSC has any advocacy for putting the issue of this water harvesting structure into the course curricula of either school or, university or anywhere?
We have big plan. Like we have a green school movement in which we are ranking schools and rating schools. We have a green campus program, habitat program. We are doing our own way, but what I'm trying to say, it's a long journey. We have started even 10 years ago, which we are not supposed to do. Academic institutions are supposed to be catching up the contemporary action research on the ground, what is required. What is happening is our academic institutions are actually busy preparing people, prepare our cities like San Francisco and other places. The problem is that we only are preparing 100 cities. We are preparing engineers. No, the problem is that we are preparing, our outputs are going only for Amrut cities and smart cities. Nobody knows that 7,500 cities in India, which are the remaining urban centers, how do they live? Nobody knows that how do they plan for their water and resources, which is Vijay Lakshmi ji keeps on having that innovation for water treatment, all those. The point is that we should plan those places also such that they should not become like Delhi and Mumbai one day. I think that is what is required, that we don't follow the same path, same trajectory. If we, like Indumati ji was saying that lake, I know that we don't have a space, catchment is lost. But if we surrender to that, the future areas catchment should be protected, which are the future urbanizable areas in the master plan. But because we are surrendering to this thing that in urbanization, we can lose catchment and lake will be filled with treated sewage, which is a new model which is emerging nowadays, saying fill the lake with treated sewage, the whole definition of lake changes. Lake is supposed to have a rainwater from your neighborhoods and act as a linkage between the river and the water bodies connection. But we have changed the whole meaning of saying in urban area, we can abuse the lake. We can put the treated sewage. Sometimes sewage treatment might work, may not work, and we will use it as only for fishing and maybe for no other purpose. People are claiming that they have restored the lakes in 30 days, and some people have restored 75 lakes in one year also.
So I think we are running out of time. Siddharth, please arrange for the group photo quickly while the conversation can continue. I request everyone to open their video so we'll have you captured on the photo. And we actually lost 50% of the people already. Yeah.
मुझे 2-3 मिनट में जाना पड़ेगा. I have
अच्छा, ठीक है.
Yeah.
Please,
so, yeah.
Everyone open and we'll have a photo with the speaker. And yeah, I think we could not take questions from Pramod as yet.
They can write to me, please.
Yeah. So I think Pramod can speak to you directly. Yeah.
Ma'am, already I have sent some queries and it's very interesting. I'll not.
I think he is going to leave. He is going to leave. Pramod,
right.
you do it offline.
It's all right. I already sent my questions. So later.
Please drop an email to me, srohila@csc.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. I would request everyone to please open your videos. We can have one group photograph. Rajni, can you take one photograph?
And you want to announce the poll results?
Yeah, do we have that time? So okay, so
at least the photo you can take and then
Geetika, vote of thanks before our speaker leaves.
Yeah.
So should I?
Yeah, you can start, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rohila. It's like a amazing sort of discussion, and I think it can continue another 2 hours. People are so much motivated of all the kind of questions they have. Thank you so much for sparing your time and sharing with us for this webinar. We are really looking forward to have, I think, much more interaction. And if not more webinars, but this is fantastic. And nature-based solution, as you have already mentioned, the government has taken up. So I think CSE, DA, and this organization have a great role to play. So please, we can also sort of work together for that. And thank you so much, and looking forward to have more interaction.
Thank you very much, everybody, for sparing 1.5 hours for this. We always say that we are talking always, but thanks for, I hope we are able to enhance the water literacy. Thank you, Vijayji, for giving me a chance.
Thank you. And as Geetika said, we will collect what topics interest the audience. and you will have to come back for a more detailed discussion.
Looking-
And yeah,
looking
this is a general introduction, but I think after that we'll have a special interaction. Thank you.
I look forward to please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
But we can
And
continue
thank
with
you
the other
all our-
participants. Yeah.
Thank you all our participants for your time. And today we really got around 70 participants,
Yeah,
which is a great, everyone has put their time. So many questions come up, and also as
Oh,
Dr.
interestingly, a
Vijayalakshmi.
lot of youth have participated. That's very interesting, and questions also came from the budding scientists. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think what Dr. Vijayalakshmi has already mentioned, if you have any topic you think is very important and we can have one webinar, please come forward, send us an email, and we will certainly do that. We will try to do. And even you can also suggest some name of some good speaker where we can then connect to and have some kind of discussion. And you can also suggest us how we can make it more interesting. If you have any more suggestion, please put it in the chat, or you may email to us. So we will improve this kind of interaction. And I thanks to our donor who is Danida in this case. And we have, this is part of one of our projects, but it's more on literacy on water management, wastewater management, rainwater harvesting, and so on. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, team.
And I would also like to thank Department of Science and Technology, Pani Water, and DS Center of Excellence, Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland, University of Copenhagen, and Vidya Bhavan Polytechnic. These are the project partners with us.
Partners.
Yeah.